get started.
That's it. Okay. Okay, good afternoon and welcome to this hybrid meeting of the Development Management Review Committee. I would remind all attendees that this meeting is being recorded and webcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. I have agreed the attendance of some members remotely and would remind all remote attendees to mute their microphones when not speaking. If you want to speak remotely, please put up your electronic hand. Okay, we'll move on to item 1, apologies and substitutes.
Yes, Convener, there's no apologies, and Councillor Brays, Councillor Doran and Councillor Durno have joined the meeting remotely today.
Thank you. And the other member of the committee, I think, was ruled out by missing the previous meeting when we first discussed that. That's Councillor Nicholl, so that's why he's absent. Okay, item 2, declarations of interest or statements of transparency. Okay, I'm not seeing anything there, so there are none. Item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting. Okay, Councillor Brays.
Yes, sorry, Convener. I suppose I do need to make a statement of transparency. I'm a council-appointed director of Angus Alive, who manage the Moniki Country Park, well, they have been, well, someone has been consulted regarding the impact that it might have on users of the park, but that person was Angus Council's employee, not Angus Alive's employee, and I don't believe that I need to recuse myself from because it's such a tenuous link. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brays. Okay, moving on to the minutes of the previous meeting, the 25th of January. Are they satisfactory? Happy to agree them. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 4, which is 1 Brokey Cottage, Moniki. Members obviously were on the site visit this morning, and we have got Mr. Christensen, who is going to take us through the planning contribution. So I would hand over to Mr. Christensen at this point.
Thank you, Convener. Just be grateful if you could let me know if you could see the slides. Good. Well, good afternoon, members. I am Paul Christensen of the Development Plan Team at Angus Council, present today as independent planning advisor to the committee. I can confirm that I've had no previous involvement in the application and that I have no conflict of interest relative to the case, applicant or any interested party. The case in front of members of Dmrc seeks review of the non-determination of an application for planning permission in principle for the erection of a dwelling house at 1 Brokey Cottages, Moniki. The application site measures approximately 950 square metres and forms part of an extended garden area associated with 1 Brokey Cottage. An outbuilding for the existing cottage is located in the northeastern corner of the site. The site lies out with the Craigton of Moniki development boundary, as identified in the Angus Local Development Plan 2016, and is bound on its northern and eastern side by a stone wall with garden ground for 1 Brokey Cottage beyond. A stone wall is the boundary on the western side with Moniki Country Park beyond. On the southern boundary, the site is again bound by a stone wall and trees beyond it. The indicative site plan shows that access to the site would be from Brokey Cottage from the B961 public road, with a breach made into the boundary wall on the eastern side of the garden to the new property. Looking at the sides in terms of the location, members will note the red line area of the application site, and will notice the location of the site in close proximity to the Moniki Reservoir, Country Park. Zooming further in, red line area of the application site is identified on this plan and map. We can see the B961 running to the south of the site, with Craigton Gobmaniki area beyond, and the school further down the road of the B961 to the east. And again, Maniki Country Park and Reservoir clearly identified, showing here where the cursor is, to the west of the application site. The application site is just where my cursor is now. You can see Brockie Cottages just here, and you can see its location in relation to the development boundary identified in the Anchorage Local Development Plan. You can see that the application site is out width of the development boundary. Looking closely at the location plan, identified as 1 Brockie Cottage, where my cursor is, to the east of that, number 2 Brockie Cottages, and you can see the application site set within the garden area of number 1 Brockie Cottage. Beyond that, to the west, you can see the footpath within Maniki Country Park. Looking at the site plan, you can see here just the red line application area. There's obviously no detailed plans identified at this stage because the application is a planning permission in principle. The site access would be shared to the new site, proposed site, with the 1 Brockie Cottage, and you can see that there would be a breach in the existing stone garden wall to access the property. Garden area for 1 Brockie Cottage beyond to the north. Looking at the photographs, this is a picture of 1 and 2 Brockie Cottages. Number 2 is immediate in our foreground, just where the large tree is. Number 1 is beyond, to the south of both cottages. The southern boundary of the Brockie Cottage as existing. Shared access for the new property that's proposed, as well as number 1 Brockie Cottage. The Maniki Country Park, and it shows the application site where my cursor is running round. The stone wall is to the west, and a wall is currently to the east of the plot, and the existing garage outhouse building located in the northeastern corner. But you can see that this is obviously the application site with which is garden ground at present within Brockie Cottage. Again, zooming in a little further to that, you can see the garden ground area of the application site with the stone wall to both the east, where the breach would be made in order for the site access, and to the west, which runs along the boundary with Maniki Country Park. Looking south, you can see again the garden area, the stone walls to the north and south, and sorry, to the east, west, and north, and also to the south with trees, mature trees beyond the southern boundary. Beyond the trees line is the B961, and beyond that is an area
Must have frozen, Mr. Christensen. Maybe we'll just give you a minute or two to get back online. We had lost you there a wee bit, so
okay.
If you could just repeat what you said in the last 30 seconds, maybe.
Okay. I was just summing up the presentation, Councillor Duff. There obviously is no papers, no report of handling in front of members because this is a non-determination review. I was going to point out the policies. I think I mentioned those last time, the relevant policies for the determination of this case, because there's no report of handling. The main policies for consideration would be in terms of the Angus Local Development Plan, 1, DS4, and TC2 relating to the countryside housing policy, part of that policy, and the countryside housing supplementary planning guidance. And in terms of National Planning Framework 4, the relevant policy for consideration for members would be policy 17 relating to rural.
Members heard the last slide, you know, the previous one, you know, the plan. I don't know if they all heard that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Paul's frozen again.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Christensen. Are there any questions for Mr. Christensen from members? Okay, shaking of heads there. Do members have any questions for any other officers who are on the call? We have Mr. Barnes from Roads and Mr. Petrie from Environmental Health. Okay. Okay, I'm seeing shakings of heads. Do members need any? Do they have enough information now to determine the case? Okay, I think I'm seeing nodding of heads rather than shaking of heads. Okay, thanks. So we've got enough information to determine the case. Okay, I'll start just in going round the table, get members' views. Maybe start with Councillor Durno. Give us your thoughts from this morning and this afternoon.
Thanks, Convener. I'm going to go against the officer's advice on the TC2. I think that this is a new development in the countryside, and it is a single dwelling, and the development would round up an established building group as there's new houses across the road, and it would fill a gap site. I'm quite happy with the site and the plans, so that's my view. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Durno. Councillor Brays.
Yes, thanks, Convener. I really can't find any good reasons not to allow this development to take place, and I realise that our officers have pointed out policy reasons. I think it is a rounding off, because actually there's nowhere else to go after that. You know, and you've got the reservoir and the road. There's nowhere for it to continue thereafter. So I think it is a rounding off. And regarding the views from the reservoir and the embankment, well, most of the people who walk along that embankment probably park their cars at the main car park and go for their walk. And they're going to be passing through various other buildings within the park, built in different eras and different styles and designs, and it doesn't seem to put them off wanting to come for a walk. And I think there are things that can be done in the planning process to mitigate any visual impact it might have from the top of the embankment. So yeah, I'm quite happy for this to go ahead. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brays and Councillor Dorn.
Thank you. I agree with what colleagues have said. I do think it is rounding off. I would want to see some conditions attached to it, if approved, relating to just protection of amenity regarding the exact permit, like the orientation and position of the house on the site, and particularly for people who would be living in the house, because the view is right on the path. And you can see the existing buildings from the path, so I don't think this building is going to add anything additional beyond what is already there, really. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Dorn. And yeah, my own view, I would agree with my three colleagues. We've obviously had the benefit of the site visit this morning. I would say the issues that which were with the application, I suppose it was outside the local development zone for Craigton of Moniki. That was essentially that you saw that on the plan, which was effectively everything east of the B961. However, we did allow, there was a big, if you like, the bit of that easterly bit was outside the development area next to the car park, and the houses we saw this morning were approved, although they were outside the development area. So it's also worth pointing out the development, local development plan is 2016. It's now 8 years old, so it's 3 years out of date. And I would agree with my colleagues that it is essentially a rounding off of there is nowhere further to go. There is no, we're not going to get any ribbon development or whatever, because this is right next to the reservoir. It's utilising some unused ground. For me, it's a small community. An additional household in that community strengthens the community, I would say. So I think there are, if you look at the rural housing approach and rural communities, which I think are supported by MPF4, I think that's a benefit. Ms Magson, I see you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Convener. I wonder if you'll just allow me to ask members.
I think, Tina, you're on mute.
I think you've been muted. Sorry.
Oh, it's just I could hear myself back, which is a little bit odd. I wonder if members could indulge me with consideration and provision of the parts of the development plan that they are referring to in relation to their submissions. Also, whether any material considerations have been considered in relation to reaching this. It's for the decision notice that needs to be issued in terms of procedures. Also, just in terms of reasons, just to clarify and solidify reasons as to why the decision is being made as it is.
Conscious that we haven't yet. I mean, if we were to approve the planning application, I don't know whether Mr Christensen has got potential conditions with him or not, if it was to be approved. Could you maybe indicate that, Mr Christensen, or not at this point?
I do at this stage, Convener. I do have draft conditions that I can share with you. I'm happy to do that now, or whether you want to answer Ms Skamags in terms of the sort of solidifying those reasons first, or it's up to yourself. Just let me know what you want to do.
Yeah, I think we'll just solidify the members' views for the decision they're taking, and then we will listen to the conditions that you've brought along. I think that's probably the best way. I guess for myself, the material considerations for me is that the local development plan is quite old. It's now 8 years old, so it's supposed to run for 5 years. So that, I think, is the material consideration. Logically drawing the development plan, for me, the reservoir and the footpath would be a logical end point for the development area, and I'm not quite sure why it was drawn the way it was before, because it seemed illogical that it included the school and the car park, but not the land immediately opposite. So there was an illogicality there, and clearly the 2 cottages we're talking about were out with the development area, which seemed a bit bizarre. So I think if you draw that development plan to include up to the edge of the reservoir, that for me would make a lot more sense. So I think the plan is old and it's a bit illogical. So I think that's a material consideration. A number of members have said that they would regard it as a rounding off under TC2, and that's not something I had thought of, but I would agree with them. I think it could be seen as a rounding off. So that would be the material considerations that I would write down. I'm happy to hear the thoughts of other elected members. Councillor Durno.
Thanks, Convener. I think it's really good that there's a school right across the road which means if any person has a rural job that wants to come back into the community of Maniki, then having a house and a school across the road is really helpful. And I think we need to support our small villages. They're losing post offices and shops, etc. And I think building houses in an area that, as you say, can be rounded off to make it look more like a community is a good thing. Thank you.
And indeed, I mean, one of the factors we've mentioned with similar ones like this, that often the role in rural schools is quite small. So any additional housing is potentially a benefit there. Councillor Brace, see you've got your hands up as well.
Yes, well, I would cite TC2. I consider it a rounding off. But also, I think it maybe is a gap site, actually. The site sits between a house and an embankment that was built by the hand of man for a particular purpose. It may not exactly meet the definition of a gap site, but I think it's certainly in the spirit of what a gap site was, of what was intended when we talk about gap sites. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bray. So we've got some material considerations there, and some justification for the decision. Councillor Dornan.
Yeah, I agree with what's being said, and I just wanted to add in that, like, it supports the community there, and just to note as well that the application put in mentions the fact the unsuitability of the current house in terms of accessibility, relating to kind of supporting older people to live in the community with a carer, and that wouldn't be possible in the existing dwellings there. So I wanted to mention that as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think the only other comment I would make is we did have comments from the access officer concerned about privacy issues. Now, obviously, I don't think he's a statutory consultee. He's giving us his opinion, and I think while I think one of the members did point out that the current houses suffer from the same lack of privacy because you can look down on them from the path. I guess my view on that one is the developer, the applicant, has considered that and is happy to build a house under that situation. And clearly that perhaps provides a challenging task for their architect. But they're effectively taking that on, and anyone who was to buy the house subsequently would be buying it with their eyes wide open as to the site. So I think that's a risk for the developer, and I think it's not a reason that we should reject it. So I think on that basis, I think we're all agreed on that. Can we ask you, Mr. Christensen, to now give us the conditions that you've got drafted?
Sorry, convener. Can I just clarify, just in terms of the decision notice, just in what Ms. Maxim was obviously referring to there. Just wondered, in terms of the development plan, just in terms of, you made reference to TC2, the rounding off, and the gap site. Just want to be clear for approving the rounding off test. Rounding off has to to meet that test in the development plan. It has to be an established building group of 3 or more dwellings. So in this case, I think there's only 2 dwellings, and a gap site can't be a gap site if it's within the curtilage of an existing dwelling. And I think the slides showed that obviously it's currently garden ground. So I just wanted to be absolutely clear for the purpose of the decision notice. But obviously that's a key part of the review. So are you saying that you think that it meets those 2 tests in terms of rounding off and the gap site and what it says in the development plan, or are you relying solely on the material consideration that you put forward as well? I think it just needs to be clear. I don't know if Ms. Maxim would agree with that. I'm just not a little.
You help us there, Ms Magson?
The decision notice does need to be clear. So I think what Mr Christensen is just trying to do is clarify, because the decision notice then needs to be absolutely, with no doubt at all as to the reasons for your decision.
So we've got a view from the elected members that, in their view, this is either, I mean, Councillor Brace has suggested that it is a gap site. It's not the conventional gap site where you've got a row of, let's say, cottages and there's a gap between them, and the one in the middle is the gap site. TC2 rounding off, Mr Christensen say it has to be 3 or more buildings. My view is that it's not always a black and white case. It's never absolutely clear. It's not exactly as it is in the. You can't have every situation of what I'm trying to say is different, and I think this one, I would see it as, perhaps if we define it as a gap site, which I think allows us to say that in our view, as far as TC2 is concerned, it's a gap site, and I think that would be for me. I think the fact that the development plan is old, I think that's relevant, and it's also, I think, it's not been logically drawn out in my view. We clearly took a decision before to approve a development which was 7 or 8 houses which were out with the development area. So for me, that for me is a bit of a material consideration. I think the supporting the rural communities is again a material consideration. I think that's something that we want to do for all the reasons that members have said. So I think we've got enough there to justify the decision. Can we progress with the conditions, Mr Christensen?
Thanks, convener. Yeah, just bear with me just a second. I'll open this presentation again. So condition, members can see that, okay?
Certainly clear to me.
Okay. So condition 1, development hereby approved an expiration of 5 years beginning with the date on which the permission is granted. The reason, in order to clarify the duration of this permission in accordance with the requirements of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997 is amended, and to ensure that it will lapse if not implemented within that period. Condition 2, the application for approval of matters specified in condition must be made before 1, the expiration of 3 years from the date of grant of planning permission in principle, 2, the expiration of 6 months from the date on which an earlier application for such approval was refused, or 3, the expiration of 6 months from the date on which an appeal against such refusal was dismissed. Whichever is the latest, only one application for approval under 2 and 3 may be made after the expiration of the 3-year period mentioned in 1. The reason, in order to clarify the time period within which an application or applications for approval of the matter specified in condition must be made. Condition 3, plans and particulars of the matters listed below shall be submitted for consideration by the Planning Authority. No work shall begin until the written approval of the authority has been given, and the development shall be carried out in accordance with that approval. The matters are A, the siting of the buildings, B, the design and external appearance of the buildings, C, the layout of the site including access, car parking, turning space. The car parking within the plot currently shall be in accordance with the National Roads Development Guide. D, a scheme of hard and soft landscaping including the means of site enclosure. For the avoidance of doubt, the submitted scheme shall include details of protection measures for existing trees within and adjacent to the site during construction works, and measures to enhance biodiversity within the site in accordance with the Nature Scot Developing with Nature guidance. All
You've frozen again, Mr. Christensen. We'll just give you a minute or two to get back on.
Of similar size and species.
I think if you can start at all,
required to be planted.
I think if you can start at all landscaping, because we that's where we lost you.
Okay, sorry. All landscaping shall be carried out in accordance with the approved scheme and shall be completed during the planting season immediately following the commencement of development or such other date as may be agreed in writing with the planning authority, but it shall be no later than within 12 months of the occupation of the dwellings hereby approved. Any planting which, in the opinion of the planning authority, within a period of 5 years from the completion of development is dying, being severely damaged or becoming seriously diseased, shall be replaced by plants of similar size and species to those originally required to be planted. E. Precise details of the means of drainage for the development for the avoidance of doubt surface water shall be directed to a sustainable drainage system. And F. The existing and proposed ground levels and finished floor levels relative to a fixed ordnance datum and ground floor levels of neighbouring properties, and the reasons to ensure that the matters referred to are given detailed consideration. And that's the
Thanks, Mr. Christensen. Are members happy with the conditions that have been? Okay, thanks very much. Okay, so just to clarify, planning application 23/00400/PPPL is approved for the reasons that we've given, subject to conditions that Mr. Christensen has outlined today. That's I think the end of the meeting. Thanks for your time, and I wish you a good rest of the day.
Okay, John, if you could stop the live stream.